some people wanting to kick off those panels quite soon. 3 people approached us last night.
Yep. Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Cashmore. If I can just respond to this item on the agenda. I think Councillor Hulse makes a valid point, and it's been reiterated by Councillor Darby and Cashmore, that whenever you set up the structure we have set up, the 3 committees of the whole, there will be some overlap, there will be some crossovers. And I think probably, as you've suggested, Councillor Hulse, the best place to start on this is to look at the work programs of the respective committees and see if we can sort the issue out in that way. And I'm happy for the people nominated, the Deputy Mayor, the Chair and Deputy of both Planning and Environment and Community, to form a group to look through that work program and see if we can differentiate the requirements in that way. If there are more fundamental issues, then obviously we would have to look at the overall structure. But I think that it can be dealt with through the work programs that we set up. In relation to the advisory panels, we've still got to do that work. Deputy Mayor, Councillor Casey has been appointed with an overlord's, I think that's the right term, role. The message that came back to me on the advisory panels, mainly from the community groups, actually, as you may have found, is that groups out in the community did want an avenue by which they could approach council and have their voice heard, and they wanted those advisory panels to be two-way forms of communication. The challenge is, I think, to get, as always, the right people on the panels so that we are getting people who are respected and broadly representative of that sector, and to make sure that the councils are the panels are functioning as they ought. So we'll work through that process. Perhaps if I can ask Councillor Casey to have some responsibility in that area so that we get the appointments up, so that the panels are up and running, so that before Christmas people know that they are on the panels and know what will be expected of them. And maybe, if we make really good progress, to have clarified terms of references for each of those panels. Fine, thanks. Now, is this on this topic, Councillor Lee?
Yes.
Yep, Mike.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Congratulations on your attempt to rationalise and streamline the committees and processes of the governing body. Obviously, the Super City and the governing body of the Super City has a very heavy workload and a wide ambit of responsibilities, taking into account the work of the 7 territorial local authorities and the Auckland Regional Council. I have some doubts, Mr Mayor, whether jamming all of those responsibilities essentially into 3 major committees will actually work, or deal with those responsibilities in the way in which they are needed. I look at Environment and Community Committee, which not only has responsibilities for the protection and enhancement of the environment, but also to drive economic development. All too often in the past, the environment has suffered from driven economic development. And so I wonder how much balance and how much time can be adequately given to natural heritage, to built heritage, which is something the people of Auckland are very, very concerned about, Resource Management Act matters, and so on. Another matter I'd like to raise with you, Mr Mayor, is the matter of transport. There's been a great deal of publicity about your views on council representation on the board of Auckland Transport, and you've indicated to me before the meeting that you'll be dealing with that at another meeting next week or so. Leaving that matter aside for the moment, I want to remind you, sir, that the Royal Commission into Auckland governance proposed that there be a Transport or Infrastructure Committee as part of the oversight and accountability for Auckland Transport, which the Royal Commission originally proposed. I see stuff about worsening traffic congestion, but I don't feel adequate attention is being given to this body's role and this body's responsibility in regard to transport at least, and then there are other elements, vital elements of infrastructure that again this governing body is responsible in the end for funding. So, Mr Mayor, I believe that you are at least one committee short on the committees of the whole or of major committees to deal with heritage, to deal with regional parks, to deal with natural heritage, and to deal with transport. And I urge you to give this matter further thought, because I have to say I don't believe the structure is adequate to deal with the responsibilities that we must deal with. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lee. Are there any other points relating to Councillor Lee's comments before I respond? If not, you've raised a number of points, and I think they are worthy of consideration. Whether the structure works or not, I guess the old saying, the proof of the pudding is in the eating. We'll make that judgment when we've trialled the system. A lot of thought has gone into it. I believe that it will be effective. That is not to say that we won't discover ways and means by which we might further strengthen it. In relation to the incompatibility of environment and community with economic development, I've always been firmly of the belief that they have to be complementary, that you have to go for both goals to protect and sustain your economy while building your economic development. And if one doesn't take into account of the other, and vice versa, then we are not succeeding in the objectives that we face. I accept your point about natural heritage and built heritage. I know, Councillor, that's been a particular passion of yours, and I think through the Heritage Panel, and also perhaps through the devolution of particular roles and portfolio responsibilities, we can make sure that that is not overlooked. I'm not going to go into detail at the moment about the question of oversight of CCOs, other than to say that the clear message I got from around the city, from Wellsford in the north to Waiuku in the south, was that people wanted a coherence and a consistency between what CCOs did and the main council family. They wanted clear accountability, and what I announced in answer to a request from a journalist at the meeting was that I was not filling the councillor positions for the time being until we had judged whether that was the most effective form of accountability. It would make no sense at all to fill positions and then say, but now we want to see whether that is actually the right thing to do. The mandate that is set out, I think, in CCO governance is that we have to replace, or that we may replace the people who are directors on the AT board after the triennial election, and it makes sense, I think, to examine what we want to do before making the final decision. But that decision should come back to an extraordinary meeting of the council that will be held on the 10th of November, which is next week. I have circulated to all councillors my thoughts on it, what I'm trying to find out. It's not simply about AT, it's actually about all of the CCOs, that we want to ensure that we have the proper accountability, whether it's through statement of intent, letters of expectation, other mechanisms that are available to us, the inquiry powers of the committees of the whole. All of those are important ways. There is no question but that we should demand accountability from our CCOs, and we should exercise the oversight that is allowed to us under legislation. I just want to do the homework first and then make the decision in that order that makes sense. I think that's probably long enough. I think we'll have a full debate on this probably at the end of next week, so I don't want to simply duplicate that. Councillor Filipaina, you had another issue you wanted to raise?
I did, Mr Mayor, but it's now two issues. One, I'm going to ask a question around process. The process question I have, Mr Mayor, is around appointments to the committees reporting to the governing body. Now, I don't know whether you've lost my name in the whole process of setting up the committees, but I noticed that I wasn't on any of them. I've raised that with you in particular. So what is the process that we have if you wish to be on any of the committees that are not committees of the whole? That's one process I want to sort of at least air here, because there are some committees that you have put in place that I wish to be part of. So can I ask that particular question? I then have a comment and question on the advisory panels that was raised by the Deputy Mayor.
Yep. Do you want to do the two together?
Okay, I'll raise now the question around the panels. When I saw my name with the Pacific People's Advisory Panel, was happy as Larry, and I don't know who Larry is, but I was happy as Larry. But Your Worship, I then had a discussion with some of the members of the Pacific People's Panel. Now, some of the issues that they have had is, one, the terms of reference around really getting involved in the work that they have from their perspective. Also, Your Worship, and this is one, they raised a concern with me, and I'm airing this now, is that it took a few months, and I think it took through to about April or May before, after the election process, that they ended up getting together. There was another few more months before they could actually get their whole meat into the issues from a Pacific perspective. So I welcome your earlier comment that, you know, we need to have a look and hopefully by the end of this year have the terms of reference in place, and again with Councillor Casey. But I will be hopefully interested to find out that we don't sort of wait month, and then we're into the end of next year before any real work that our Pacific panels and all the advisory panels get their teeth into. So those are the questions I have for you, Mr Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Look, can I start with the second issue you've just raised? Yeah, look, I think it is important that we get on and we do the job, and I think the role that we've created for Councillor Casey is so that we have some consistency around the panels, but so that those of you that are liaison members on the panels, but actually all of us generally, are confident that those panels are working to the best possible effect. Some people have come back to me and said our panel is fantastic, we're really happy with it. I've heard other comments and seen other comments through earlier in the year from other members that say we don't think they're achieving what they want. So now is a very good time just to examine how the panels are working, whether we want to make changes to the way in which they work and how we want to set them up in terms of their membership. So I think if we can coordinate that through Councillor Casey, and that each of you give the input that you believe is appropriate to ensure that we've got those terms of reference right. You're the people that have served on the panels, you've got the first-hand knowledge, you know what's worked and what hasn't worked, so we'll be relying very much on the input that you can give us, and from the panel members themselves actually, how, if at all, these need to be changed. So if I can ask you to have a bilateral discussion with Councillor Casey on that, that would be good. On the first question, I went through the process in terms of the appointments to committees that all of you are aware of. I think I spoke to each of you personally on a number of occasions about that. Inevitably, not everybody got what they wanted, but if there are particular areas that you want to take up with me again, Councillor, I'm more than happy to continue that conversation. So that perhaps if we do that offline, that's probably the best way of handling it.
Mr. Mayor, I just wanted to make one comment on what you've just said, is that I'm actually not on any of them. That's the whole point I'm making.
Yeah,
So,
yep.
so I don't know where that slipped through the cracks. I'm not actually on any of those subcommittees, so hence the offline conversation will happen.
Yep, very good.
Okay.
And there are a number of other committees that we're coming to in another section on our agenda where people have also been given responsibilities. Okay, if that's the discussion, I move that my decisions on the establishment of committees and the appointment of chairpersons are noted. Can I have a seconder for that?
I'm happy to second that.
Seconded. Thank you, Councillor Hulse. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
To the contrary, carried.